Hello everyone, we are here to take the TEAS 7. This is the science portion of it for the practice test. My name is Kelly, I'm a registered nurse, and I have my master's in nursing education, and I hope I am helpful to y'all today. We're going to go through each of the questions, and I'm going to try to give you the rationale as to why certain answers are correct and other answers are incorrect. So let's just dive right in. Question number 1. What is the correct order of the scientific method? We've got 4 different options here. First one is analyze, hypothesis, procedure, determine problem, and conclusion. Second one is hypothesis, determine problem, procedure, analyze, and conclusion. And then third one is determine problem, hypothesize, analyze, procedure, and conclusion. And fourth one is determine problem, hypothesize, procedure, analyze, and conclusion. Okay, so to start off with, I think I would completely get rid of these 2 right off the bat, because if we don't know what our problem is, we can't begin to do the scientific method. So the first part of the scientific method is to determine our problem. From there, we want to hypothesize what it is we're going to try to prove or disprove. And then we need to do a procedure. This procedure is where we're going to gather our data and actually conduct our experiments. And then we're going to analyze how did that all turn out. And then, as with all of them, we have our conclusion at the end. This gives us our results. So that means that number 1 is our correct answer. Number 2. Water striders are small bugs that can move across the surface of water, relying on water molecules forming hydrogen bonds with one another to create surface tension. Which term describes this chemical process that allows these bugs to walk on water? Adhesion, cohesion, solubility limit, or osmosis? Correct answer is cohesion. The cohesion, this is the process of similar molecules binding to one another. So it's through that hydrogen bond that creates that surface tension that these little bugs can walk on water. Versus adhesion, this is the process of 2 different substances clinging to one another. So they're not clinging to the water, they're just on top of the water here. So an example of adhesion would be the capillary action of water as it moves up a small glass tube and gets stuck to the side of it. Solubility limit, this is the maximum concentration of a solute that can be dissolved into a solvent. So we're not really doing any dissolving in this particular case. And then osmosis is the process of water or other solvents moving through a semi-permeable membrane. We don't have any of the water going into these little bugs. There's nothing being exchanged in that area. So cohesion is our correct answer. Number 3. In scientific research, which term describes the claim that no relationship occurs between variables being studied? Hypothesis, null hypothesis, refutation, or disprove? What do you think? Null hypothesis. This is the opposite of a hypothesis. The hypothesis tries to determine a causal type of relationship between 2 variables. The null hypothesis, this claims that there is absolutely no relationship at all, which is exactly what we wanted to know. Which one of these is for no relationship? A refutation, our third choice there, this is an argument against the theory or statement, and then to disprove means that we want to prove it as false. Not necessarily that there was no relationship, but that we're just trying to prove something false. So our null hypothesis is our correct answer. Number 4. Which of the following is the difference between DNA and RNA? Option 1, RNA has specific base pairings, whereas DNA does not. Option 2, DNA carries genetic information, whereas RNA synthesizes carbohydrates. Option 3, RNA is single-stranded, whereas DNA is double-stranded. And number 4, DNA is made of nucleic acids, whereas RNA is made of proteins. Correct answer is DNA is double-stranded. I always learned it as it was that double helix. So we've got our DNA is double-stranded and RNA is single-stranded. So that's what makes this one correct. So for choice A, both RNA and DNA have specific base pairings, so that makes this one not correct. And then they also both carry genetic information. So obviously this one is not correct. And then option D here, they are both made up of nucleic acids, not proteins. So that's what makes number 3 correct. Question 5. Cirrus clouds form when warm air rises to high altitudes with cold temperatures, causing water vapor to form ice crystals on dust particles. Which term describes this process? First choice is sublimation. Second is freezing. Third is deposition. And fourth is condensation. I'm going to choose deposition. Deposition, the way this works, this is the phase where you actually have water in the gas form, and it skips that liquid form in the middle and goes directly to a solid. So we're going straight from gas to solids, skipping that liquid form. And that's what's happening when we're talking about air up in the warm air up in the high altitudes here, where it goes right from actually the cloud form into the ice crystal or dust particles. So that is deposition. Versus our freezing, this is where we would go from our liquid right into our solid. And then condensation, obviously, this is when a gas changes and becomes gas to liquid. And sublimation, this is the process of a solid directly becoming a gas. So to recap all of that, deposition is we have our gas and it goes directly into a solid, skipping that liquid phase, which is what's happening up here in our clouds. Question number 6. Which part of the nervous system is responsible for the fight or flight response? We have our sympathetic, our somatic, our central, and our parasympathetic. Go ahead and look over those for a second. And then if we break them down, we have our somatic and our central nervous system, and then sympathetic and parasympathetic. These are kind of opposites all of each other. And our sympathetic is actually the one that is for our fight or flight, versus our somatic one. This is the one that controls our voluntary conscious movements, and our central one, this is the one that really comprises of our brain plus our spinal cord. Parasympathetic, this is when you're just relaxing, and this is when the rest of your body, things like digestion, things that are not necessary really for the fight or flight, take place. Sympathetic is when we get that fight or flight. Your adrenaline's going, the heart rate goes up, blood pressure goes up. So that's what this one is for fight or flight. Question 7. Which chamber of the heart receives oxygenated blood from a different chamber of the heart? We have left atrium, left ventricle, right atrium, and right ventricle. Answer here, we're talking about oxygenated. So we have to know that the left side of the heart is the side that has the oxygenated blood, versus the right side has deoxygenated. Then we also have to know that the atriums actually receive blood from vessels, not from chambers. And our ventricles are the ones that are on the bottom that are receiving blood from the chambers above, which are our atriums. Atria. All right, so left ventricle is the correct answer here. Question number 8. During the process of transcription, a segment of mRNA is synthesized from a strand of DNA with the following sequence. I'll let you read that. Which of the following is the resulting mRNA strand? And here are our 4 different options. Correct answer is our third one. So the RNA polymerase is an enzyme that facilitates the process of transcription. So the RNA polymerase reads DNA in the 3' to 5' direction, and then it forms that mRNA in the opposite, the 5' to 3' direction. Additionally, there are 5 nucleotide bases involved in RNA and DNA. So we've got the guanine, the cytosine, adenine, and thymine. Those are only in DNA. And then you've got the uracil, which is only in the RNA. In the synthesis of a strand of mRNA, the mRNA guanine pairs with the cytosine from the template DNA strand. and the adenine with the thymine, and the uracil with the adenine. So that's what you're seeing with the difference here in your letters. Therefore, the correct answer is our answer number 3 here. Question 9. A muscle sample is isolated on a microscope slide. It's observed that the muscle lacks striation. Which statement can be made with this information? So our first choice is it was isolated from the heart. Second choice is it's smooth muscle. Third is it was isolated from the GI or gastrointestinal tract. And then fourth is the muscle is strained. And the correct answer is it is smooth muscle. So smooth muscles, these are your involuntary muscles, and these are not striated. Your cardiac muscles are like the one exception though. Those are still involuntary muscles, but they are striated. And the muscles of the GI tract are smooth muscles, but they do have other muscles mixed in there because it helps to facilitate movement through the GI tract. And then strained muscles, those are when muscle fibers are torn or they're overstretched. So that would not be, you would see striation with those. So it's smooth muscle is your correct answer. Question 10. Which tissue of the immune system is responsible for producing all of the blood cells? So you've got lymph nodes, you've got spleen, you've got bone marrow, and the thymus. Correct answer is bone marrow. Bone marrow because this is where all of the cells are made. You've got your red blood cells, your white blood cells, versus in your lymph nodes, this is where they filter out bacteria, toxins, all the things go there and get filtered out. Your spleen, this is where white blood cells are kept. And then your thymus, this is where your T cells, which are a type of white blood cell, these go there to grow and mature. So bone marrow is the answer for producing all of the blood cells. Question number 11. The following structures are part of the urinary system. Place them in order that waste is removed from the body in urine. So we need to start from where do they first enter the excretory system or our urinary system, and then where it finally is removed from the body. So where it all begins is our kidneys. That's where we have our nephrons and all the other pieces that make up our kidneys. Then after we've got our urine concentrated, it's all filtered, it's going to go to the ureters, because from the ureters, we want to be able to get that down to our urinary bladder. And then from our bladder, in order for it to get outside the body, it needs to go to our urethra. And we got them all right. Question number 12. Which of the following are sections of the small intestine? Select all that apply. So we need to remember to make sure that this answer may have more than one choice to it. So we've got ileum, cecum, jejunum, and the pylorus. Correct answer, ileum and jejunum. So our ileum and jejunum, directly part of the small intestine. Our cecum there, that is the portion where that small intestine actually is at the start of the large intestine. So it's a totally separate structure, but it is between that small and large intestine. And then the pylorus, that is the part that connects our stomach to our small intestine. So while they do connect the small intestine, they're not directly part or sections of the small intestine. Question number 13. Which of the following is the least reactive group of elements? 4 choices are the alkali metals, nonmetals, halogen, and noble gases. Noble gases, those are our correct answer. These are the least reactive because they have a completely full valence shell. And on the periodic elements chart, they're the ones that are the furthest to the right, versus the alkali metals, nonmetals, and halogens. These all have an incomplete valence shell. So these are much more reactive than the noble gases. Question number 14. Which layer of skin has the function of binding the rest of the skin to the underlying muscle? We've got our dermis, our epidermis, our hypodermis, and adipocytes. Our correct answer is our hypodermis. This is also known as our subcutaneous tissue. It's the deepest layer of the skin, and the whole purpose of this is to bind the dermis to the muscles, along with storing some fat, making sure that we can regulate our body temperature, and then our overall padding. Epidermis, that is our most upper layer of the skin, followed by the dermis, and then the hypodermis. And then the adipocytes, these are just simply cells that are predominantly composed of just adipose tissue, hence the name there, adipocytes. What are codons? Are 4 choices: triplet bases of DNA and mRNA, triplet bases of tRNA, mutations in DNA, or enzymes that seal gaps in DNA. Number 1 is what we're going to choose. And the rationale behind that is codons are triplet bases of DNA and mRNA. These code for RNA bases and functions of transcription, such as stopping and starting the process. Triplet bases of tRNA right here is our second choice. These are called anticodons, and these code for amino acids. And then codons that do not specifically refer to mutations is choice C, and we do know that DNA is not enzymes. So choice D is not correct. Number 16. Which of the following options is an aspect of standard anatomical position? So our 4 choices: lying on your back, palms facing inward, lying prone, or standing upright. Answer here, standing upright. The standard anatomical position is the body standing upright, facing forward with the arms at the sides and the palms facing forward. So that's where this question right here was incorrect, because you want your palms facing forward in the anatomical position. And then obviously lying on your back and lying prone, being that you have to be upright for the anatomical position, that eliminates those 2 answers. Question number 17. A substance has a pH of 6.8. What is true about the substance? Is it acidic? Is it basic? Is it neutral? Or is it a salt? Correct answer is that it's acidic. It is barely acidic, but it does have a pH less than 7, and that's our criteria for whether or not something is an acid. So our basic substances, these have pH that's greater than 7. Neutral, completely neutral, would have to be exactly 7. And then salts are substances that contain both, and they can be composed of both acids or base. Question number 18. Which of the following describes empirical data? First choice is data derived from observations. Second choice is the expected results. Third choice is the calculated data to be confirmed through observation. And the fourth one is the data that's been reviewed by several scientists. Option 1, data derived from observations. Empirical data is data that's collected during an experience through observations and measurements. Expected results and calculated data to be confirmed through observation, which is our second and third choice. These describe theoretical data. Theoretical results are determined beforehand based on mathematical calculations or expectations of results in an experiment before collecting the actual data. Data that several scientists have reviewed is peer-reviewed. That doesn't refer to the empirical data, which is what the question was asking. Number 19, which structure is responsible for delivering blood from the heart to the lungs? First choice is pulmonary artery. Second choice is right atrium. Third choice is the superior vena cava. And the fourth choice is the pulmonary vein. Correct answer is the pulmonary artery. The thing to remember with arteries and veins is that arteries are always going away from the heart. Artery away, vein is going towards. So if we look at the question and it asks which direction we're going from the heart to the lungs, that means we're going away from the heart. then we automatically know that this is going to be a pulmonary artery, or it's going to be an artery. In this case, because it's going to the lungs, that's what makes it the pulmonary artery. The right atrium, this is the chamber in the heart that actually receives the deoxygenated blood from the superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava. So that's not correct because we're not going towards the lungs. And the pulmonary vein, this one is actually the one that is bringing the oxygenated blood back, because veins go back to the heart. So that's coming back from the lungs to the heart itself. Question number 20. Which of the following scenarios can increase the rate of a reaction? 4 choices: decreasing reactant concentration, increasing the volume of container holding reactants, decreasing temperature, or increasing pressure. Answer is increasing pressure. In the case of reactant between gases, increasing the pressure increases the rate of which the gases will collide and react. So changing this element is going to increase the rate of that reaction. Decreasing the reactant concentration decreases the likelihood of those reactants colliding and reacting, since there are fewer reactants in the given area once you dilute it a little bit. And then increasing the volume of a container holding that reaction also decreases the concentration, giving all of those a little bit more room. And then decreasing temperature slows down the speed of the atoms and molecules and making that reaction rate slower, which is what we are looking for here. Which one of these increases that reaction rate? Question number 21. The trigeminal nerve, also known as the fifth cranial nerve, is responsible for providing sensory innervation in the face. The entire nervous system can be broken down into 2 different classifications. The trigeminal nerve is part of which nervous system? Now this is an open-ended question. It was a little bit trickier. So we've got 2 different options. We have the central nervous system, and then we have the peripheral nervous system. And here, make sure I spell it right. We're going to choose our peripheral nervous system as the answer to this. Yay, we spelled it right. We got it right. So the 2 different options, the central, this is mostly just your brain and your spinal cord. So anytime we're reaching out past that, we're going to start talking about the peripheral nervous system. So the cranial nerves that start in the brain, they're not necessarily part of the brain, particularly our trigeminal one. We're reaching out into our peripheral nervous system. Question 22. Which principle can be used to calculate the frequency of alleles for a specific gene in a population? First choice, Mendel's law of segregation. Then we got Jacob Monod's model, Hardy-Weinberg's principle, or Mendel's law of independent assortment. Take a second look at those. And our answer is Hardy-Weinberg principle. This choice, the third one here, is used to calculate the frequency of alleles in a population for a specific gene, which is exactly what our question was asking. The choices A and D, these discuss how genes are inherited from the parental generation, and they state how genes are not linked to each other, but rather inherited independently from one another. And then choice B explains how several genes can sometimes function under one promoter. Question 23. Which of the following is not one of the 4 major types of macromolecules? Nucleic acids, the first choice. Second choice, carbohydrates. Third, amino acids. Or fourth, lipids. I'm going to choose amino acids. And that is correct. It gets a little tricky because we think of nucleic acids, carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids as being the 4 major types of macromolecules. And proteins are made up of amino acids, but since we're talking about the macromolecules, these are large molecules. So proteins are correct because it's multiple amino acids that make up the proteins, but in this case, this just states just amino acids. So we're not talking about a macromolecule here, so that's what makes this one as the one that is not one of the 4 major types of macromolecules. Question 24. Identify the location of the epidermis that is the spinous layer. So we've got a couple different pictures here. I'm going to let you take a look at each one of them as I kind of scroll through. So I think we can get A and B on the same screen here. And if you can see the X, this is what they're trying to get you to identify. So is the X in the epidermis? So here's the X here, here's the X here, and then here's the X here, and then the X here. And we kind of touched on this a little bit in a previous question. I know it's hard for you to see all of them on my one screen. Here is choice 1, choice 2, choice 3, and choice 4 right here. And the answer is actually going to be choice 4 because we talked about the hypodermis as being that lowest level versus, oh, here's a good picture right here. This gives you all of the different levels or layers of the epidermis. Then you've got the dermis and the hypodermis. 3 different levels. And the hypodermis is the one that's closest. Remember, that was also the one that was responsible for holding the skin to the muscle. So we knew that that one was going to be the deepest one. Which of the following amounts is not the same as 10 grams? So we have to do a little bit of math here. So our choices are 10,000 milligrams, 0.01 kilograms, 100 decagrams, or 1,000 centigrams. Give you a second to do a little bit of math. And we're going to choose 100 decagrams. So milli means 1,000, and kilogram also is a 1,000 unit. Decagram, the deca refers to 10, and the centi refers to a 100. So if we're starting off with our 10 grams, we do have a decimal place here. You can't see it, only because when it's 10, we don't need to write 10 decimal points. We know it's just 10. But if we do need to pay attention to that decimal point when we need to convert it. So if we're going to convert to milligrams, we have the 10 with a decimal point, and we're going to move it to the right because it's a smaller unit. So milligram means thousands, so we need to go thousands places. So we've got tenths over 1, over 2 is hundredths, over 3 spots would be thousandths. So that would give us our 10,000 milligrams, so that's correct. Kilograms are a larger unit than grams, so we know since these guys are smaller than kilograms, we're going to need to take that decimal point that's there and move it over 1,000ths over to the left. So we're going to go 1, which is tenths, 2, which is hundredths, 3, which is thousandths. So this is also correct. And then decagrams, that is, we're going to be moving our decimal place over 1 because deca is tens. So again, we got that decimal point there, moving it over 1, meaning that it would actually be 1 decagram. And then centigrams, which are smaller than our grams, so we know we're going to go to the right, and it's hundredths, so we're going to need to place it 2 spots over, giving us the 1,000 centigrams. Question 26. A man notices that homicides are more likely to occur during warm weather months. He also observes that ice cream sales are higher during warm weather months. He erroneously concludes that high ice cream sales cause an increase in homicides. Which term describes the relationship between ice cream and crime? All right, take a second to think about that one. And we're going to go with positive correlation. So the matching increase in homicide rate in ice cream sales is an example of positive correlation. This means that both variables are moving in the same direction. So as homicides went up, that's one variable. Ice cream sales also were going up. But their changes are not necessarily related to each other. A causal relationship. This is when there's 1 or 2 variables and they directly affect each other. And then a negative correlation is a relationship where two variables, they move in the opposite direction. So if our homicides went up, our ice cream sales would have had to have gone down. Question 27. Thiocyanate is a sulfuric compound that can cause damage to the thyroid. Which of the following would be an effect of thiocyanate on the body? Our choices: increased blood pressure, growth abnormalities, decreased urine output, and increased estrogen levels. We need to remember here, what does the thyroid do for our body? So we are going to choose growth abnormalities because our thyroid hormone, this is what controls growth in the body. It doesn't regulate blood pressure, so that means that one's wrong. And which kidneys are the ones that regulate our urine output? We learned that in a previous question. And then our ovaries are what actually controls our estrogen levels. So that makes choice number 2 correct. Okay, question 28. Which of the following scenarios can prevent transcription of DNA? 4 choices are: DNA is wrapped around a histone, DNA is being unwound, DNA is supercoiled, or DNA is packed as euchromatin. Go ahead and take a second to think about that. And our choices: DNA is supercoiled. When DNA is supercoiled, it's over-twisted. So there's that increased strain in the helix, and that transcription sites can be blocked. And that's exactly what it was asking for. Which one can prevent the transcription of DNA? So choice B, this is actually the first step of transcription, so that's not correct. And then choice D, it's easily transcribed. Question 29. Which type of joint moves freely? First choice is synovial. Second is cartilaginous. Third, fibrous. Or D, bony. And we want this joint to move freely. Answer is synovial. Synovial joints, they have that fluid in between there that helps those bones to move freely, and that was exactly what the question was asking for, which one moves freely. These are like your elbow, your knee, those things that you want to be able to move freely so that you can move around. Cartilaginous ones, these are immobile, so this would be between your bones, so like your rib cage. And then you've got your fibrous ones, these are completely immobile. This is in your skull. You definitely would not want that to be moving freely. And then you have bony, and this is not a joint itself. Our joints are made out of bone, so this really does not apply at all. Question 30. Why is replication important in scientific experiments? Our choices: to get the experiment's methods down so you can record them. Second choice is to show that the results are not random and occur with statistical significance. Third choice is to prove the hypothesis is right. And the last one is to give scientists time to come up with a new experimental idea. So which one of these is why replication is important in scientific experiments? And the correct answer is the second one. We want to be able to repeat it to show that it wasn't just an anomaly. It is statistically significant. And so that is why that one is correct. And an experiment can only prove if a hypothesis is wrong, not if it's right. So that's why this one is not correct. Question 31. A study is being conducted for a new painkiller. One group of participants in the study were given the new painkiller and another group were given sugar pills. What is the group being given the painkiller called? So our choices are control group, our study group, our experimental group, or our social group. And these are the people that are being given the painkillers. So our answer is our experimental group. These are the ones that are actually being given the painkillers. control group, this is our group that does not receive the painkiller, and then study group and social group, these are not really terms that are used in the research process itself. All right, question 32. Salmonella, a gram-negative flagellated pathogen, is one of the most dangerous microorganisms found in certain foods. Which of the following statements about Salmonella is true? Our choice is it has thin cell walls, it has dark blue or purple gram stain, it uses pili to move, or it's classified as an archaea. Think about that one for a couple seconds. Our answer is it has thin cell walls. Salmonella, it's a gram-negative microorganism, which they told us up here, and it does have thin cell walls. Gram-negative bacteria have cell walls composed of only layers of peptoglycan and a lipopolysaccharide membrane. So gram-positive bacteria have thick layers of peptoglycan in their cell walls. Gram-negative bacteria appear pink after a gram stain, so this isn't right, while gram-positive bacteria appear blue or purple after staining, and we just talked about how this one is a negative, so that doesn't work. And pili are small hair-like structures that attach to surfaces, and Salmonella is flagellated, so it's got that flagella, and so that's why pili doesn't work. It moves around with a single flagellum that rotates to propel it, and then Salmonella is a prokaryotic rod-shaped bacteria, so Salmonella is a gram-negative microorganism, which we talked about up here, and it has thin cell walls. Gram-negative bacteria have cell walls composed of only thin layers of peptoglycan and lipopolysaccharide membranes. Gram-positive bacteria have thick layers of the peptoglycan in their cell walls. So since we're gram-negative, that would not be a correct answer. And then gram-negative bacteria appear pink after a gram stain. So this choice here, this would be applicable to gram-positive, and that would not be the Salmonella. And then pili, these are small little hair-like structures that help attach to surfaces, and we learned up here that it's a flagellated pathogen, so it has just that single flagellum that helps it to move around. So this is not applicable. And then it is a type of prokaryotic rod-shaped bacteria, so it's not an archaea. Question 33. Which part of the respiratory system is responsible for regulating the temperature and humidity of the air that comes into the body? So choices are larynx, lungs, trachea, and sinuses. And the correct answer is sinuses. The sinuses, this is the first place where the air actually enters in through your nose, gets past to the sinuses, and then this helps to regulate that temperature and humidity before passing it on to the rest of the body. And it travels from our sinuses, then it would next be through your larynx, then your trachea, then through your lungs. But this is the first place that it comes into contact, and this is what controls the temperature and humidity. All right, question number 34. During which phase of the female reproductive cycle do progesterone levels rise to maintain the uterine lining? We have our luteal, our follicular, ovulation, or menstruation. Correct answer is luteal. This is the third phase of the female reproductive cycle. And this is when progesterone levels rise to maintain that uterine lining in case of implantation. So this is really important for pregnancy itself. Choice B, this is the follicular phase. So this is this is the beginning of when you would have egg production. Ovulation, this is actually when the egg is released from the ovaries. And then menstruation, this would definitely not increase the uterine lining. This is actually when the uterine lining is shed. So that's why these three are not related to the actual uterine lining itself, which is what that question was asking for. Question 35. A person fractures their arm and it's put in a cast. Over time, the myofibrils of the muscles in their arms shrink due to lack of use. What is this process? So we have first muscle fatigue, then atrophy, muscle contraction, or a strain. So it's important to think about, in this question, what do they want to know? So we're talking about the muscles shrinking due to lack of use. So that kind of gets rid of a couple of them right off the bat. Muscle fatigue and strain, now we haven't used those muscles in a while, so that probably doesn't apply. Again, we're still not using the muscles, so muscle contraction probably doesn't apply. And if you think about medical terminology, the atrophy is your correct answer, because when you're not using a muscle, you use it or lose it. And if you don't use it, this is when those myofibrils actually shrink. So atrophy is the correct answer. Hepatic encephalopathy is a condition where the urea cycle is disrupted, causing ammonia to accumulate in one's blood and eventually pass into the brain. Which organ must malfunction for this condition to occur? So we want to know, what is the question asking? We're talking about this ammonia accumulating in the brain, but we want to know which organ first malfunctioned to make this happen. And so we've got kidneys, ureter, nephrons, and liver. Correct answer is liver. If you look up here, hepatic, this means liver. So we know that the encephalopathy, which is that accumulation of the fluid in the brain, that's actually being caused by the liver, versus kidney, ureter, and nephrons. These are all related to the excretory system or the kidneys, and that one does not apply. Question 37. The biochemical reaction of proteins forming into simpler amino acids is accompanied by the loss of a water molecule. What reaction is this? We have hydrolysis, dehydration synthesis, decarboxylation of the amino acid, and combustion. Dehydration synthesis is our correct answer. This occurs when two reactants combine to produce a larger molecule. A water molecule is just the byproduct of this reaction. So when amino acids combine to form the chains that make a protein, this reaction occurs. Hydrolysis, which is our first choice here, this is a chemical reaction that involves a water molecule breaking apart bonds in a different one, so that doesn't apply. And the decarboxylation of an amino acid, this is the removal of the carboxyl group from an amino acid, and it results in the formation of an amine. So it's not talking about what our question is asking. And combustion, like dehydration synthesis, this involves the loss of a water molecule. However, combustion reactions occur when hydrocarbons react with oxygen that produce carbon dioxide and water and release energy. Which of the following is the SI unit, Standard International Unit, for measuring temperature? So we have Fahrenheit, Celsius, joules, and Kelvin. Our answer is Kelvin. Kelvin is a standard international unit for temperature. It's a standard unit for temperature since it defines zero Kelvin as the absolute zero, and Fahrenheit is the imperial unit for temperature. Many people believe that Celsius is the standard international unit for measuring temperature, but it's actually the metric unit. And the joule is for energy, not temperature, so that one doesn't apply to this question. Which of the following is not a function of the lymphatic system? First choice is to transport interstitial fluid from tissues. Second choice is to absorb and transport fats and fatty acids from the small intestines. And the third one is to transport blood to the heart. And last one is to remove proteins that are too large to enter the capillaries. This one, transporting blood to the heart. That is the circulatory system's job. That is not the lymphatic's job. And they're two totally separate. They're separate systems. They do work together, but the lymphatic system is not capable of transporting blood to the heart itself. And all of the remaining ones are functions of the lymphatic system. Question 40. How can viruses inject their genome into their host organism? So we have our active transport across the membrane, we have phagocytosis, we have making a hole in the plasma membrane, or we have fusing with the plasma membrane. I'm going to choose fusing with the plasma membrane. This is how they get their information over to the host organism in order to be able to take over that cell and hijack it to do what it wants it to do. It fuses right together with it. They don't move across membranes by active transport. They don't have phagocytosis properties, and they do not make a hole in the plasma membrane. They fuse and take over their cells. A chemist is adding NaOH to H2SO4, 1 milliliter at a time, and they're monitoring the pH of the H2SO4 after each addition of NaOH. Place the following pH readings in the order from the start to after all the NaOH has been added. All right, so for this we need to know what is NaOH and what is H2SO4 as far as we're talking about pH readings. So we know that NaOH is basic, and we know H2SO4 is acidic. So we want to be careful that we're slowly increasing the pH rather than quickly going from one extreme pH to another, because that's when it can become unstable and not safe. So we want to place them in the order to start after all the NaOH has been added. All right, so we are starting very, very acidic, and we're going basic. So we're going to want to start off with our most acidic. Remember, we talked about this in a previous question where 7 was completely neutral, below 7 is acidic, and above 7 is basic. So since we're starting acidic, we definitely would not want to start right off at 9.4. Putting something very basic into something very acidic is not a good idea. So we're just going to basically slowly go up our pH. And that is correct. We did good. All right, the following are structures of the respiratory system. What is the correct path that carbon dioxide takes when it's expelled from the lungs? We're talking about the lungs. All of these are obviously parts of the anatomy of the lungs, but we want to know exactly where is that carbon dioxide and oxygen being exchanged, because that's what the question asks. We're starting there. So we're not starting with the actual intake of air through our nose, but we're talking about where does carbon dioxide and oxygen exchange take place when it's expelled from the lungs. So that's all the way very, very, very down into the alveoli, those little teeny tiny sacs down inside the bronchioles. And then the bronchioles are found inside the bronchi, and then they directly connect to the trachea. Then it would go from there through your larynx, out through your nose, and completely expelled to the outside. But these little guys, the alveoli, this is where that carbon dioxide and oxygen exchange takes place, and then its pathway out. Let's see if we're right. Yep. Which endocrine gland secretes melatonin? So our options are the hypothalamus, our pancreas, our adrenal glands, or our pineal glands. Correct answer is pineal gland. So each one of these guys does something different. Our hypothalamus, this is the one that really kind of maintains our temperature, our hunger, thirst, all of those things. Pancreas, this one is the one that controls our insulin and glucagon levels. And then the adrenal gland, this is our cortisol, our response to stress, all of those types of secretions. And then the pineal gland, this is the one that controls melatonin, helps us sleep at night. Question number 44. How long are sperm viable in the female reproductive tract? Our choices up to 12 hours, up to 1 day, up to 5 days, and up to 10 days. Answer is up to 5 days. So when there's ovulation, the ovum that's released from the ovary is only viable for 12 hours. So that is talking about something totally different. We're not talking about the sperm in this answer. We would be talking about the ovum is only viable for 12 hours. Up to 1 day is not correct either. And neither the sperm nor the ovum is viable for up to 10 days. Neither one of them can last that length of time. So C is our correct answer. Sperm can last in the female reproductive tract for up to 5 days. Question 45. Which of the following terms describes the variation of a gene? We have locus, genotype, allele, or phenotype. And these are just all the different variations that we can have in a gene. Correct answer is allele. And these are the variations of a specific gene. For example, the eye color that you have can be blue or brown. The locus of a gene, this is where it's located on the chromosome. And genotype, this is the genetic makeup of the organism. And D is the outward appearance of the organism. So C is the only one that talks about the different variations, like blue eyes, brown eyes, that kind of thing. Question 46. Which organ of the digestive system has the primary responsibility of absorbing water and electrolytes from masticated food? We have stomach, small intestine, liver, and large intestine. Remember, masticated is a fancy way of saying chewed. So the answer to this is large intestine. So the stomach, actually mastication, so the beginning of digestion is in your teeth, starts with your teeth, and then your salivary glands moving down to your stomach and your small intestine. The liver helps out by giving some bile to help digest some of that fat, but it's really the large intestine's job that actually picks up and absorbs back a lot of those water and electrolytes from the food that you eat or the drinks that you drink. Question 47. Two oppositely charged atoms are attracted to each other and held together. What is this interaction known as? Ionization, anion, ionic bond, or polyatomic ion? Correct answer is ionic bond. These are when two different atoms are held together through the attraction of opposite charges, which is specifically what they just asked for. Then we have ionization. This is a process of substance being turned into ions, and then anions are negatively charged atoms or molecules. And a polyatomic ion is a covalently bonded molecule that has a net charge that is not zero. Question 48. Which of the following is the purpose of a scientific experiment? Choice 1, collecting data. Choice 2, testing a hypothesis about a cause and effect relationship. Choice 3, proving an opinion. Or choice 4, collecting evidence to support an agenda. So this goes back to our scientific method. So we are going to choose testing a hypothesis about a cause and effect relationship. We want to test the hypothesis to potentially support or disprove it. Although collecting data is an important part of the scientific experiment, it is not the purpose why it's done. And scientific experiments can never prove anything. They can only support an idea or hypothesis. And scientific experiments should never be utilized as a means for collecting evidence to support a specific agenda. Having a specific agenda before a scientific experiment can lead to bias, which would not make for a good scientific experiment. Question 49. A chemist attempts to make silver chloride with a double replacement reaction. They dissolve sodium chloride and silver nitrate separately into water and then mix the two solutions together, making aqueous sodium nitrate and precipitated silver chloride. In this reaction, what is the solvent? So they give you lots of information, but you need to remember what is a solvent. Here's our choices. Sodium chloride, silver nitrate, water, and silver chloride. So all of these things are mentioned up in here, but which one of those is the solvent? And the solvent is simply what is creating the dissolving. What is the element that helps it to dissolve itself? And it talks about in here how they're putting them into water. So the water is what's helping it to dissolve. So the water should be the correct answer. Solvents are substances that something is dissolved into. That's a way better way of saying it. All the rest of these are all parts of the actual reaction itself, but it's only the water that helps it to dissolve. Question number 50. A student observes that on days they sleep 5 hours or less, they scored significantly lower on exams than when they slept for more than 5 hours. What is this an example of? First choice is causal relationship, scientific experiment, quantitative observation, or replicable result. So we're going to look at this as the causal relationship. We're not doing a scientific experiment necessarily. This is more of like the beginnings of one. Quantitative observation would mean that we have some data that we're using to go over that. It gathers numerical and quantitative data. And then replicable, meaning that we have repeated this over and over and over again. And this is what we came up with. And this is just the beginnings here. We're talking about a causal relationship. I sleep 5 hours or less, I don't do well than if I slept 5 hours or more. And that is the end of our quiz. All right, so thank you so much for watching. I hope this was helpful, these 50 questions that we went through, and I hope y'all are super successful. Keep studying. Go us.